Power to the People Pleasers. My name is Amy Ballantyne, wellness and life coach and host of Power to the People Pleasers. And I'm so excited to have my guest, Laura Martin, here from Healing to Happy. It's so great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is wonderful. So, you have a very in detail story about and connection to trauma and helping people to get unstuck from their trauma to find their purpose. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, Laura?
Yeah, so I am a trauma and relationship specialist, and that was never really the plan. Like, I always talk about how I'm an accidental entrepreneur. Healing to Happy was really born out of saving my own life. It started with I've had, sexual assaults, I've had domestic violence, I lost my mom to addiction, financial things, eating disorders, chronic health issues, things of that nature. And I went on a journey. I had moved to Asia when I was 22 years old, right after my mom passed, to go and find myself because I was in a not so good place. But the thing about trauma is that it doesn't really matter where you live. It's going to find you if you don't actually look at your stuff. And I kind of just distracted myself. I fell into love with this man that was a drug addict and domestic violence. And so I kind of took on those traits as well and really got codependent and trauma bonding and all of that stuff that happened. And I didn't know these terms at the time. I just thought that was my life. And these were the cards that I was dealt because that was my family history. Like, there wasn't anything outside of the norm in that. When I was 24 years old, me and my partner at the time just had a physical altercation, and I was out sitting on the balcony and I was contemplating taking my life. And it was in those moments, it's like, you can choose to keep going on the path that you're on, and it has a shorter expiration date than you would like, or you get off the ground and you do a really scary thing and you take radical ownership of your life and you do something. And I don't know why. Like, I don't know why the vision came to me. It was like, this is meant to be something someday. You're supposed to speak on stages. You're supposed to do whatever. Like, I, at the time, like, had chronic health issues. I had an eating disorder. I was, over abusing drugs and alcohol and exercise and all these kind of things. And none of that made sense. Like, that's not, for someone like me, it was like, what do you mean? Like, what are you going to do? You're living in Asia and you're teaching English and you don't even, So I sat down with a friend the next day and I finally told her, like, hey, I need help. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Her name was Emma. God bless her cotton socks. And she was like, hey, you have a really disordered relationship with food. Why don't you go study it? And at the time, again, deep in an eating disorder. So I was like, sure, why not? Like, I will literally do anything. And I started to study nutrition and became a health coach. And that's when I started to realize a purpose outside of myself and started to study my body, outside of just responding to life. I was like, oh, wait, I can control what's going on in my body. Granted, I didn't heal my trauma. So I became very orthorexic and very controlling. And like, it was a nightmare to go out to eat with me. And like, my health issues just kind of kept getting worse. And I remember sitting in my naturopath's office and she's like, do you want to talk about how your depression and anxiety and trauma and all the kind of things, do you want to talk about how that's related to your health issues? Because I then went to specialize, like, my business was booming. I was speaking on stages around Southeast Asia, had hundreds of clients. Like, this whole movement was happening of like this gut-brain connection. IBS anxiety is what I specialized in. And yet my health was trashed. Like, nothing I could do would fix it. And this rash was happening on my body, and but it was on the backside of my body, so I could hide it. And then on my 26th birthday, I was standing in front of this, like, I was delivering a workshop. I was speaking on a panel. There's hundreds of people. And the rash had gone from my back to my face. Wow. And so I was like, vanity wins. Unfortunately, it should have happened a long time ago. It should have happened 8 months ago when I was presented this opportunity from my naturopath and this whole thing started. But because vanity, whatever, I was like, dang. And, she like planted that seed in my head where I was like, oh, okay. And I had known this stuff, like gut-brain connection. Obviously I knew, but like, there's a difference between knowing and actually doing it. Like, I was my worst client. And so I was like, okay, I need to gain weight. One, I need to look at what my trauma is. I need to look at what my relationships are. I need to really set into this. And I realized that the core was all of this unhealed. Like, I was just living in escapism. I was living in control. I was living in abandonment and, the fear of rejection and the fear of abandonment. And at the core of it was just abandoning myself. And I didn't realize any of that. until I took radical ownership. And I was like, I am the common denominator in every single thing that's ever happened in my life. So why don't I do something about that? And it just kind of set me on this path, and it led me to relationships and trauma and all the beautiful things I now do.
So, thank you. Thank you for sharing so openly about this. And I think there's a lot of power in what you said right off the bat, was that you noticed and you reached out for help, right? And so for those people listening who resonate with anything you've just shared, because there are a lot of pieces that many people can connect to, that reaching out was a critical first step, would you say?
Yeah. And it was scary. I mean, like I reached out to my friend, but then it took me a year or so, like, to even leave that partner and go into like Al-Anon, which is a support group for people that are children or partners or parents of addicts. CODA, Codependency Anonymous, like doing those kind of things. It took me 2 tries. It took me a year to even know what that is, because I didn't identify with it. I was like, I'm not codependent. I'm a high achieving individual. Look at the business that I've run, and and all these kind of things, not realizing my entire business was a trauma response. But that's a different story. And realizing, all these kind of things. And I remember once that was brought to my attention, like, hey, Al-Anon exists for people like you, if you want to go do that. Because I was fighting these demons on my own and investing only in business courses, and like not really looking at like my relationship to self and all the things that I now teach, where it's like, I remember sitting on that bench. It took me 2 tries to even get in, because I didn't want to admit defeat, especially being in this world of self-development and coaching and whatever. Like, I didn't want to admit that that's what was wrong, but really it wasn't what was wrong. It was taking ownership. Like I don't have to do it alone. And yet I wasn't ready to tell my friends. I wasn't ready to like, bring that to my own company, but I was ready to go into the back alleys of a basement of a church and get help. And then from there built the confidence to now speak openly and talk about these things. Because I think we do need to speak about them. Like, more people than we know go through this.
Yes, and trauma takes so many different forms, right? As you were sharing all those different ways people can identify it. So, can you share with me these clients that you're working with now? How does your work help them take radical ownership?
Yeah, so I freaking love my work so much. It's I love it. It's one of those things where oftentimes, so I work with a lot of like high achieving entrepreneurs, coaches, mentors, things of that nature, especially in our field, that they continue to invest in business programs, although they're longing for love. And they get this whole trauma stuff, right? Like, we understand trauma around money wounds. We understand trauma in general, but like some of us don't identify with trauma, or we see it as weak, or we see it as like, the good girl is seen but not heard, and we need to hustle and we need to work for it and we need to earn it, especially when it comes to relationships. We got to earn it. We got to, like, it's basically this job interview thing, and we're very in our masculine energy, like all these wounds. And then wondering why at the top it feels so lonely and nothing's coming of it. And we don't realize, like, oh, I've gotten myself out of the deep end. Because there's a big thing as well that, unfortunately, a lot of the women I work with have built companies because of their trauma, because they're trying to prove something, because they're trying to bounce back. And I love that. Like, that's the whole thing, is like, I've done this and let me do this. But like, there hits this breaking point where it's like, you no longer have to prove yourself. Like, it is supposed to be enjoyable. It is supposed to be relaxing. It is not relaxing all the time. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, it's supposed to be like an amplifier of what you already are. But if you're constantly proving yourself and getting yourself sick, and you don't have deep relationships, and you don't have a relationship, or your marriage is going to crap and they're sleeping on the couch and they're not having sex, like all these kind of things that are happening on the back end that none of us talk about because we work in this field of self-development. I can't admit that my relationship is actually an energy leak to me and not where I want it to be. But because we can be in this state of like, if I take my foot off the gas for my business and I focus on my relationship,
What happens?
one of them has to go. Yeah, like, what happens? And it's like, business and relationships are the same thing. And if you're coming at them from a trauma response, you can only get so far. I'm not saying it's not, like, I have this thing where it's called like the sexy savage. Like, I'm not saying it didn't get you through the door. I built my business because of my trauma. I'm not saying that. But I also lost my health, my relationships, my self-worth, my validation was all outside of myself. So I get it. It does get you through certain things, but then there's this point where it's like it's empty. And so my biggest mission is like I want to help women and men and whoever like become wealthy alongside becoming rich, and like wealthy in health, in relationships, and in life, and making memories, and moving outside of your triggers of your past so you can actually be fully present in your future and this moment right
I love that. I love that. So tell me about, you talk about getting a foundation so that you can find that purpose. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so everything that you are right now is 95% of a cellular makeup of everything you've ever known. You know, the people, the places, the environment, the things that you heard when you were 7 years old. Up until then, like 7-year-old, like there's the running joke in my field where it's like we're all traumatized 7-year-olds running around in human shells, like all responding and reacting from that. Like it's so true. This is like that inner child work that we hear. Like everything you know, all of your beliefs. Like when you say you don't like someone's personality, which we say a lot in this world, what you're saying is you don't like how that person learned to defend themselves in this world. That's
Mm,
it. And that can be changed. Your nervous system is like plastic. It will stay the way that it is. It'll stay a plastic water bottle. Unless you apply heat, then all of a sudden you can make clothing out of it. Like who knows? Like it's bendable, it's movable. And like when you get those foundations and you use that 5% conscious thinking brain to challenge what you know to be true,
mm,
everything changes. Everything becomes this like your life becomes your artwork. It's not that it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's very uncomfortable because what you know is 95%. Like the easy thing is your habits. The easy things is responding in the way that you're used to. The easy thing is doing what you know.
yeah.
The hard thing is getting uncomfortable and leaning into that. So when you get the foundation, right? And this is where like I work through in my programs, it's self-knowledge, healing, embodiment. When you work through the self-knowledge piece, like when you understand how you work, no one can take that away from you. You're no longer just reacting to life, you're taking responsibility for your life. And then you can move into this healing aspect of life where it's like, I know now it's going to be weird, it's going to be crunchy, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's like this messy middle kind of area where you're like, okay, I'm going to try 1,000,010 tools to
Yeah.
figure out what is going to work for me, because the way I do things isn't for everyone, but there are so many ways to heal your trauma. Like
Yeah.
so many ways. That's what I do on my podcast, like interview all these different modalities, because it's like there's so many different resources of how this works. You just have to find the one that you want to stick with. And then it becomes this embodiment piece where you no longer think of it. Like I have the phrase where it's like you're gonna heal so far that you forget the war against your body was even part of the story. You're going to forget that your trauma was even part of the story, or, the things that were part of your story, because you just are this version of yourself now, because the foundations are so rock solid. It's not that doesn't matter. It's just not the biggest thing in your story and your survival complex anymore.
I love that. So tell us a few other components of creating this foundation. I love what you're talking about so far.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the beginning of my work is a lot of like the nutrition side of stuff. Like I still use that, the gut brain connection stuff, because the
Yes.
thing that I think is missed in trauma, like I found when I was going, and one, trauma isn't just big T events, right? Like we got to first understand that. I get that I have been through big T trauma. Trauma is just that your body has not completed a cycle. It is your body's reaction to an event. So I have people where it's a breakup. I have people that have food poisoning and they got trauma from it and their body's stuck in this fight or flight. I have people that they got, caught off in traffic and they're stuck in this and it was like this close scenario. Like it doesn't have to be what I walk through. And I think that's the big thing that people don't identify. It's like it's an activation that wasn't completed. So don't get lost in that. And so it's
I'm
first
so glad
identifying.
you said that. I'm so glad you said that, because I think that some people who maybe haven't gone through, you called them big T traumas, might look at this and say, okay, well, this isn't for me. I didn't have one of these, high level
Yeah,
things. But there's lots of opportunity, or not opportunities, lots of examples of trauma, like you're saying. So thank you for addressing that.
exactly. And it's honestly looking at it like, what characteristic traits of yourself do you see yourself repeating the cycles? Are you, like in my line of work, are you dating unavailable men? Are you dating boys instead of men? Are you, spending all your money and you're not understanding why? Do you have this survival complex? Or you make money, lose money, make money, lose money? Like You don't necessarily have to go back to the origin story. I think we fall too in love with the origin story. I think you just have to figure out how to be safe in the present moment to build resiliency for the future. That's the difference of my work. Therapy is where you go for the origin story. I think it's very beneficial, but the part about therapy is trauma is in the body. You're just talking about it in therapy. And I think it's important, but there's a way that we got to get our nervous system to complete that cycle and get to it. And this is why I said the nutrition piece, because oftentimes we're going to therapy and the part that we don't talk about is we're not eating, because we're stressed and we're forgetting. Or we're forgetting to eat, or we're not sleeping, or we're drinking too much, or we're, abusing drugs on the weekend because they, give us a false sense of aliveness. We don't talk about that stuff, especially to our therapist. Sometimes I get that a lot where it's like, I can tell you more than I tell my therapist. I'm like, I get that. But we do these things where we forget we're like, therapy is amazing. And there's a body that has to be spoken to. There's a body that you have to work through. And because we've been through trauma, or we've been through these things, or we live in the modern world, connecting to our body is this foreign object. Like figuring out when you're full and you're hungry, figuring out when you're thirsty, figuring out when you're tired. Like describe that to an alien, please. A lot of us can't, where it's like, when I'm very hungry, it's like, I have a headache. I need to, I'm like crabby. I'm all these kind of things. I'm like, then you're way past when your hunger cue was. Or like your fullness, it's like, I'm very full, I'm bloated, I need to take a nap. I'm like, then you're way past it. And so it's like understanding these kind of elements of ourself and the self-knowledge piece. And then also the foundation of like understanding what part of your nervous system are you in every situation of your life. This is a thing that in my person events, like in my things, I always like walk people through, because we have 3 stages. We have our ventral nervous system, we have our sympathetic, we have our dorsal. And so our ventral is when you're like, you maybe felt this like on a date or with your partner or whatever, like you're the only person in the room with them. And like, you're so present in that moment, and like, you're so connected, and you're there, and you remember everything that was happening in that moment, but like nothing else around you, like you're there. That's your ventral, like you're so present. And then your sympathetic is, sympathetic gets a bad rep, first off, but sympathetic is like when you're angry and you're off the rocker and you're, throwing things and whatever, stressed. But also when you're really excited. Like I make the running joke, I'm like, I spend a lot of time in my sympathetic because I am a giant puppy stuck in a human suit, and I get very excited about everything. Like that's how my boyfriend would describe me. He's like, you are just a puppy. Like you are just da-da-da. And I'm like, but I am in my sympathetic. I have to actively get into my ventral because I'm excited about everything. Like it's Christmas every day in my brain. And then there's the dorsal, where it's like the shutdown phase. Again, there's 2 sides of this. Shutdown be depression. It could be like that moment when I was 24 years old. You're disassociated. I call it the Eeyore phase. Like you're just done. You're done. Down. You're in that mood. Or also in my world is like the burrito week. It's usually right before your period, when you're like, I'm going to be a burrito. I don't want to talk to anyone. I want to watch sad movies, and like I don't want to be anywhere near my phone, and I'm just going to be here. Like I'm going to be with myself, and like that's okay too. Like you can be in these phases. It's not bad or good. It just noticing which one it is. And every time, like you can feel into those things. I walk my clients through practices and that. So like when you enter into a room, when you go on a date, when you go on a podcast, when you do like normally when I'm talking like super excited, but I know because of public speaking, if I speak that way, I'm dysregulating the audience. I have to be regulated when I speak. I have to be in my ventral state when I speak, when I go on a date, when I'm with my partner, when I'm in these things. Like what energy do you want to be matched with? Enter in the room with that. And when you can start to control that within yourself and identify as well, because then you can notice the types of relationships you have. Does this person make me feel calm? Does this situation make me feel calm? Does this person make me feel excited? Am I nervous? Am I nervous and excited? Like, what is this? Because they feel the same in the body. Like, does this shut me down? And like having this type of awareness gives you control back over your emotions, because especially as females, we go through 80,000 million emotions a day. Like it is the most beautiful thing about us, but we shut it down because we're so afraid of them, because we don't know, because we're not in control of it. But when we can actually get into these states and be like, oh, how do I want the world to respond to me? Let me take ownership over what I'm feeling right now and see how I can be a match for that. So I can model what I want the world to match to me instead of mirror what and being reactive to what's going on around me. So those are a few foundational principles of like the self-knowledge piece, so that you can start to move and make things happen for you as opposed to against you.
I love this. Laura, so powerful, the work that you're doing. We are coming to the end of our time together in finding your purpose. What is a final thought that you'd like to leave the people who've been listening?
I feel like the thing that's coming through is, you know, taking radical ownership over your life is the thing that's going to set you free instantly. I get it. I get it. You could be in such a horrible situation right now. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, if I think back to my life, like, no one blamed me for how I was doing things. They're like, that makes sense. For what she has gone through, that makes sense for how she's living her life. And that was like this giant excuse. But no one's going to save you but yourself. And that's the scary thing, right? Like, you can get the help, but you got to lead yourself to the help. And so it's really looking at, where in my life can I take radical ownership that, you know, this is what's happening. Not that I'm at fault, not that you're at fault, but you're responsible for how you're choosing to respond.
Yes.
So how do you want to show up? How do you want to tell that story? Like, the thing that got me through my darkest times, I wasn't even a mom. I'm still not a mom. I wasn't a coach yet. I wasn't anything. It was, how do I want to tell this story to my daughter if she goes through it one day? I didn't have a kid. I didn't have anyone. Still don't. But I was like, that still holds me through, like, recent breakups and things with business. I'm like, how do I want to what is the story that I'm telling in this? And from there, you start to take ownership over it, because you get to write how that is, instead of just reacting to how it seems that it is.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. I love that idea of leading yourself first, leading yourself to the place, the next level. How can people stay connected with you, Laura?
Yeah, coming out over on Instagram. My personal one is it's Laura Patricia Martin. And then our company, our brand, our courses, our podcast is Healing to Happy. And that's Healing to Happy. And you'll probably get a voice note from me or a message from my team, because we just like to have a party in the inbox all the time. So come hang out. You'll see everything that we're doing over there.
Party in the inbox with the human that really is a puppy. I love it.
Literally.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for this incredible conversation today. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show. And for those listening, please stay tuned for the next episode of Power to the People Pleasers. Bye now.